Now, tuition plus room and board would cost $17,000 apartment below us.
What quarter?
We threw five.
She's always giving me a hard time.
Well, I really can't wait to.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner's story doesn't begin on a TV set or with the sound of studio applause. It begins with a young black mother in Jersey City, New Jersey, who named her son after two icons, Malcolm X, the fearless voice of revolution, and Ahmad Jamal, the jazz pianist whose melodies bent time. That name wasn't just a name. It was a declaration. From the moment he entered the world on August 18, 1970, Malcolm was wrapped in legacy. His early life was shaped by both challenge and resilience. His parents divorced when he was very young, and his mother, Pamela Warner, took on the full weight of raising him alone. But she didn't just raise a child, she cultivated an artist. Pamela recognized the spark early and made the decision that would change both their lives. She moved them to Los Angeles. There, while other kids played on the streets, Malcolm was auditioning, rehearsing, training. His mother became his manager, protector, and guide in an industry that didn't always know what to do with a brilliant young black boy who didn't fit the mold. By the time he was 9, Malcolm was already performing. His childhood wasn't defined by toys or cartoons. It was about scripts, monologues, and stage lights. He enrolled in acting classes and began to hone the tools that would later define him. Timing, presence, emotional depth. He was serious even then. While most children were busy just being kids, Malcolm was learning how to step into someone else's skin and make it believable. He eventually graduated from the Professional Children's School in New York, a place known for producing artists who don't just act, but live their craft. But Malcolm wasn't just trying to be famous. He was trying to be excellent. Whether it was drama, comedy, music, or spoken word, he was always chasing depth, always pushing for more. That pursuit would lead him to The Cosby Show, the role of a lifetime, and a career that would span decades. But before the cameras and the interviews, there was just a boy, his mother, and a dream. They didn't have everything, but they had each other. And for Malcolm-Jamal Warner, that foundation of love, discipline, and purpose would become the quiet engine behind everything he ever achieved. Because the truth is, Malcolm didn't stumble into greatness. He prepared for it. From childhood, he was walking towards something greater, something grounded not in glitter, but in grit. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's career was never about chasing the spotlight. It was about owning it with quiet power. He didn't need to shout to be noticed. From the moment he stepped into the role of Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, America watched a teenager grow into a man right before their eyes. The character of Theo wasn't just a typical TV son. He was textured, curious, and flawed in ways that made him human. Malcolm brought a subtlety to the role that most young actors could only dream of. It wasn't just acting, it was listening, reacting, making every moment breathe. And people felt that. They related to him. They saw their brothers, sons, and even themselves in him. The success of The Cosby Show turned him into a household name. But Malcolm wasn't interested in just being famous. He wanted longevity. While some child stars crumbled under the pressure, he leaned into the craft. After the show ended in 1992, he made the deliberate choice to step into roles that challenged him, even if they weren't flashy. He appeared in television dramas, sitcoms, and indie films, proving that he wasn't a one-note actor. In the mid-90s, he starred alongside comedian Eddie Griffin in Malcolm and Eddie, a sitcom that allowed him to flex his comedic timing while also producing behind the scenes. He wasn't just a star. He was shaping the story, guiding the tone, creating something that reflected his evolving voice. But acting was never his only language. Malcolm was a poet, a musician, and a director. His love for spoken word and jazz ran deep, and he often merged the two into performances that were as intimate as they were electrifying. He played bass guitar, wrote music, and released several albums under his own name, most of which blended jazz, soul, and conscious lyrics in a way that felt spiritual. In 2015, his musical artistry earned him a Grammy Award for Best Traditional R&B Performance, collaborating with Robert Glasper Experiment and Layla Hathaway on the song Jesus Children. He also had a strong presence in voice acting, lending his deep, commanding voice to beloved educational programs like The Magic School Bus, where he voiced the producer. It's the kind of work that often goes unnoticed by mainstream audiences. But to kids growing up in the 90s, his voice was a soundtrack to curiosity and learning. As television began to evolve, so did Malcolm's roles. He stepped into more mature, grounded characters in critically acclaimed shows like Sons of Anarchy, American Crime Story, and The Resident. He brought emotional weight to every part. Whether he was playing a troubled doctor, a conflicted father, or a man wrestling with trauma, he wasn't trying to recapture his youth. He was embracing the gravity of age. With every role, he reminded the world that black men on screen could be complex, soft, strong, angry, afraid, and everything between. Even in the final years of his life, Malcolm kept creating. In 2024, he launched a podcast titled Not All Hood, where he unpacked issues affecting the black community with honesty and nuance. It was a space for conversation, vulnerability, and truth-telling, a reflection of who he had always been beneath the fame. Off camera, he mentored young actors, collaborated with musicians, and stayed deeply engaged in artistic communities, especially in Atlanta, where he had settled with his family. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's career wasn't a sprint. It was a journey. He never let a single role define him. He built a legacy brick by brick, not for applause but for impact. His art lived in every line he spoke, every note he played, every story he chose to tell. He didn't just survive Hollywood. He mastered it on his own terms. And in doing so, he gave a generation permission to grow, evolve, and create fearlessly. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death was as sudden as it was heartbreaking. On July 20th, 2025, at just 54 years old, the man who had quietly built one of the most respected careers in television, music, and poetry lost his life during what was meant to be a peaceful family vacation. He was in Costa Rica with his wife and daughter, staying in a quiet resort near Playa Cockles, a beautiful but notoriously unpredictable beach along the country's Caribbean coast. That afternoon, Malcolm decided to take a swim. The sky was clear, and the ocean looked deceptively calm. But beneath the surface, a deadly rip current was forming, one strong enough to overpower even the most experienced swimmers. Witnesses said he was pulled farther and farther away from shore, caught in a vicious underwater grip. People on the beach rushed into the water to help, and he was eventually pulled back to land. Paramedics from Costa Rica's Red Cross arrived quickly and began administering CPR, fighting to bring him back. But the current had already taken its toll. He never regained consciousness. Moments later, he was declared dead at the scene. The official cause of death, as confirmed by Costa Rican authorities, was asphyxia due to drowning. News of his death spread fast and left many in disbelief. For decades, Malcolm-Jamal Warner had been a steady presence in entertainment, a man who carried himself with quiet dignity, rarely in the tabloids, never chasing fame, always focused on the work. He had evolved gracefully from teenage stardom into a grounded, multi-talented artist who valued privacy, integrity, and purpose. At the time of his passing, he was still active in the industry, working on a podcast that explored complex issues within the black community. He was also enjoying the fullness of fatherhood and married life, roles he protected from public view but spoke of with deep love when asked. Perhaps the most telling tribute came from Bill Cosby, who said Malcolm's death felt like losing his own son. The pain in that statement captured what many who worked with him already knew. Malcolm wasn't just admired, he was loved. His death wasn't just a loss of a familiar face on screen. It was a loss of soul that quietly poured itself into generations of art, conversation, and culture. At 54, he still had so much left to say, to write, to create. But even in the final chapter of his life, he was doing what he had always done, making time for family, seeking peace, staying grounded in real life far from the noise of Hollywood. His death reminds us how fragile and unpredictable life is, but his legacy will live in every role he played, every lyric he wrote, and every person he inspired. Malcolm-Jamal Warner was never the type of celebrity who craved headlines or chased fame. He wasn't flashing luxury or stirring controversy. Instead, he chose a quieter road, one where his work spoke louder than his personal life. For years, he kept his most sacred relationships away from the cameras and the gossip columns, not because he had something to hide, but because he believed some things were meant to be protected. Family, for Malcolm, was never content. It was the core of who he was. His earliest and most defining relationship was with his mother, Pamela Warner. She was more than just his parent. She was his first manager, his fiercest advocate, and his rock. It was Pamela who noticed his talent, moved with him to Los Angeles, and stayed by his side as he rose to fame. Their bond was unshakable. She taught him early on about professionalism, resilience, and knowing your worth, lessons that guided him through every season of his life. Even when he became a star on The Cosby Show, his mother's influence kept him grounded. In matters of love, Malcolm experienced both deep joy and quiet heartbreak. One of the most meaningful relationships of his life was with actress Michelle Thomas, who played Justine, Theo's girlfriend, on The Cosby Show. Off-screen, their connection blossomed into something real. They were young, talented, and in love. But that love was tested in the most painful way. Michelle was diagnosed with cancer, and Malcolm stood by her side until her final days. She passed away in 1998, and though he rarely spoke about the grief publicly, those close to him said he never fully got over her. Losing her left a permanent scar, one that deepened his compassion and his understanding of life's fragility. After Michelle's death, Malcolm dated actress Karen Malina White. Their relationship lasted over 7 years, a significant span in the life of any public figure, but they never married. In interviews, Karen would later describe him as a thoughtful and sensitive partner, someone deeply committed to authenticity. Years later, he found love again with award-winning actress Regina King. Their relationship captured the attention of fans who admired both stars for their talent and grace. But as quietly as it began, it ended, with both choosing to move forward with mutual respect rather than drama. Malcolm never aired personal details, even when he could have used them to stay relevant in the ever-hungry world of celebrity news. Around 2017, something shifted. Without fanfare or paparazzi photos, Malcolm got married. The identity of his wife was never made public, a conscious choice they both honored. Together, they had a daughter, his only child. And from that moment on, Malcolm began to pull away even further from the spotlight, choosing instead to pour himself into fatherhood. He once mentioned in an interview that becoming a father was the most profound experience of his life. He spoke about the responsibility, the joy, and the way that changed how he viewed everything, including his work. Friends said he was the kind of dad who read bedtime stories in funny voices, made up songs at the dinner table, and prioritized family meals over Hollywood parties. They lived in Atlanta, far from the chaos of Los Angeles, in a home that became a sanctuary. Neighbors often described Malcolm as warm, but reserved. He could be seen jogging in the mornings, picking up groceries, taking his daughter to school. He didn't want to be a star there. He wanted to be a husband, a father, a man at peace. His home was filled with music, books, and laughter. He created a world where creativity and love could thrive, not for an audience, but for the people who truly mattered to him. Even as he continued to work, appearing in television dramas, directing, producing music, and launching a podcast, he kept his family out of view. He believed in preserving that space. For him, privacy wasn't secrecy, it was protection. He once said in an interview that everything the public needed to know about him, they could find in his work. But the man behind the roles was someone only a few really knew. When he died, tributes poured in from fans and peers alike. But the most emotional words came from those who knew him in his quiet life. The ones who saw him not as Theo or as a celebrity, but as a present, loving father and a devoted husband. His family was the heart of who he was. And in the end, it was that sacred circle, his wife, his daughter, and the peace they built together, that meant more to him than anything fame could ever offer. Malcolm-Jamal Warner lived a life that many in Hollywood quietly envied, not because it was loud or drenched in luxury, but because it was balanced. He found a way to do what few child stars ever manage. He grew up with grace, transitioned with purpose, and lived with clarity about who he was and what mattered to him. His lifestyle reflected that. It wasn't about extravagance or excess. It was about intention, artistry, and peace. From a young age, Malcolm understood the volatility of fame. Having been thrust into the spotlight at just 14 through his role as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, he witnessed firsthand how success could consume people. So he made a quiet vow to himself to never let fame own him. That promise shaped everything about the way he lived. While many of his peers were chasing endorsements, partying in clubs, or stretching themselves thin for more exposure. Malcolm was choosing roles that spoke to his soul. He was carefully curating a career, not chasing trends. He didn't live in Beverly Hills. He didn't spend weekends on yachts or flood his social media with luxury cars. After some time in Los Angeles, he eventually moved to Atlanta, a city known for its rich black culture, slower pace, and artistic community. There, he bought a home not for the cameras, but for his family. It wasn't about square footage or status. It was about comfort, creativity, and calm. The house was filled with books, musical instruments, journals, and poetry. It was the kind of place where you could sit in silence and still feel surrounded by meaning. Malcolm was a deeply introspective man. He practiced mindfulness, read philosophy, studied jazz, and often wrote spoken word pieces late into the night. His mornings were intentional: coffee, music, maybe a workout or walk through the neighborhood. He enjoyed cooking, parenting, journaling, and rehearsing lines in the quiet corners of his home studio. His lifestyle didn't revolve around premieres or red carpets. It revolved around art, family, and depth. Financially, he was in a strong position, not because he flaunted wealth, but because he managed it wisely. While exact figures were never publicly confirmed, entertainment analysts and longtime industry insiders estimate his net worth to have been between $10 and $20 million at the time of his death. This wasn't surprising considering his decades-long resume. The Cosby Show was one of the highest-rated sitcoms of its era, and Warner earned not only fame, but healthy residuals from its long run in syndication. But his income didn't end there. Malcolm had steady roles in multiple successful television series after The Cosby Show, including Malcolm and Eddie, Read Between the Lines, The Resident, Sons of Anarchy, and 9-1-1. He worked consistently in television for over 35 years, a rare feat in Hollywood. He also earned directing credits, produced indie projects, and lent his voice to animated and educational series, including The Magic School Bus, which brought in royalties for years. Beyond television and film, he was a respected musician. He played bass guitar professionally and released multiple spoken word jazz fusion albums. His Grammy win in 2015 only further solidified his status as a serious artist, not just an actor who dabbled in music, but a musician in his own right. He also made money through poetry performances, speaking engagements, and later through his podcast, Not All Hood, which focused on conversations about black identity, culture, and healing. The podcast didn't just generate income. It became another platform for Warner to express who he truly was: thoughtful, measured, concerned with the state of the world and how black men are perceived in it. He never let wealth define him. There were no headlines about impulsive spending or financial collapse. Instead, he invested in himself, in his family, and in causes he believed in. He mentored young actors, supported arts programs in schools, and was known to quietly help struggling artists get their first break. In the background of a notoriously unstable industry, he was a symbol of consistency. What made Malcolm-Jamal Warner's lifestyle so unique was its intentional simplicity. In an industry built on image, he chose authenticity. In a world addicted to noise, he embraced stillness. His wealth wasn't just in dollars. It was in the life he built, the peace he protected, the art he created, and the daughter he adored. He didn't live to impress strangers. He lived to express truth. And in doing so, he carved out a life that many dream of, but few are brave enough to live.